call to order, Stan?
Yes, please. So moved. Such as it is, whatever the official way to do that is.
Okay. So,
I never followed up with Janet. I mean, I know you sent out the notice, Margaret, but
I did, yeah. So she should have gotten that. I sent it to everybody.
right. But I didn't personally follow up, so I don't know if she'll be joining us or not.
Okay. Scott, I just saw the your analysis, but I haven't had a chance to really.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect anybody's had a chance to. I had a hard time putting it together in the right words.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, when did you send this, Scott? I didn't.
20 minutes ago.
Are you able to share your screen, Scott?
I'm sure I can. Let's see.
Yeah, I don't think I was on the email, Scott.
I didn't get it either.
It went to it went to FinCom at townberlin.com. Is that not an alias?
All right, let me forward it. That's Stan's alias.
Yeah.
Only.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. Let me forward it to
So
everybody.
you don't need input for us then, do you, Scott?
Not interested.
All right, let's see. Share screen, I guess.
But having said that, I didn't get it either.
Oh,
Okay, so.
But I don't have FinCom forwarding to my personal email either. So.
Okay. So I'm sending it to everyone.
Okay.
But I should talk to somebody about how to do that because I haven't. That means I'm never getting on the stuff that just goes to FinCom.
We could, we could arrange that through our IT guys.
Yeah, I sort of thought we talked about that, but I could be wrong.
All right, just let me know when you want to go through it. If you want to wait till you get your email.
Okay, I just sent it to everyone.
I included the slides that were relevant, so you don't have to have both the PowerPoint slides up at the same time.
No, thank you.
Part of it was I just wanted to do the percentages, see how things are. When I say percentages, like what is Berlin's share versus Boylston's share, and I mean, they're always interesting numbers to come up with because I know the formulas are rather complex that the state uses on all of these things. So let me know what you want. You want me to just get started?
yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. So my first thing was just showing what the percentage change, and this is actually actual enrollment numbers, right? This was taken from this slide, and you see the dates they actually took were the January 1st of the year. And again, these are actual enrollment numbers. And I know a lot of the calculations are based on what the actual school age children are in a town. So if you're just looking at the enrollment numbers between 19 and 20, typo there, it's basically 1 percentage point. It's like 0.98. So we had 151 of 499 students in 2019, and it was 154 of 493 in, again, another type of 2020. So it's just a 1 percentage point difference. Again, this is what people actually walk through the door. Of course, I guess we can't use an analogy anymore. People actually attend class. So that was just from this here. So we know our numbers have, at least physically there, have increased. Then I just went through to look at kind of the ratios based on, and this is slide based off the revenue assessment slide. So this is looking at where you have the calculations of the minimum local contribution. I know this is where it comes into the whole things of the wealth of the town, school age children. Then there's the above minimum contribution, and this is where we get into the certain ratios between the percentages between the towns, and likewise the transportation assessment. So these are the three cost sections here. And if you look at the minimum assessment, you see that between 21 and 22, our minimum assessment went up almost a half a percentage point from 32.73 to 33.22. And then you look at the, what our above minimum was, it actually decreased because we had the increase in our minimum. So we actually went down a 0.1 percentage. So you see that we are assessed 33.875 this year versus 33.85 last year. And of course, some of this looks non-intuitive because you say, look at the enrollment numbers, it shows us decreasing. Well, again, next enrollment numbers of kids are actually there. And if you look at the transportation assessment, that comes out to the same numbers as the above minimum. Again, down 0.1% between 33.85 to 33.75. So, I mean, I put these numbers in there kind of showing the difficulty of trying to figure out these percentage changes just from these enrollment numbers. Like I said, it shows the actual enrollment being 1 percentage point more. Again, that's a number based on January 1st of 2020. I know the state, I think, uses October 1st for the actual numbers. And again, that's actual enrollment, not number of school-age children in the town. So you really see that the percentages are kind of a little bit I mean, they're in the range of that. We're at 1/3 versus Boylston at 2/3. And you see that because our minimum contribution went up, our other assessment actually went down 0.1% for FY22 proposed versus FY21. So then I just took the next slide. I'll just jump to that slide that needs to be included there is what their revenues were. And they assumed most everything being flat. So the one exception being Chapter 78, I don't recall why, but they show a decrease of 47,000. And of course, this is total Tohoto, not anything specific with Berlin or Boylston. That's a total aid coming to Tohoto. And their total district revenue, which was 89,000, they're proposing to level fund that. So the first thing, you notice from that, and this is actually in that email that came from the finance director there, was that I had noticed was that because the revenue from the state and the other revenue, states most of it, was assumed to be flat. Again, actual decrease of 47,000. If you actually looked at, basically our assessments have to absorb all of the increase. So even though we said it was what, 4.3% increase, the assessments total between the two towns is actually nearly 6%. It's 5.75 because we're absorbing this 47,000 from that decrease assumed from the state, and then every dollar increase is all going into the assessments, as opposed to if the state aid increases, which more often than not it does. Be absorbing some of that something from the state aid of 47,000. So anybody have questions up to that point? I mean, I'm throwing around a bunch of numbers. So
yeah, just one, Scott. Where are you heading with this? I can't see.
Okay, so where I was heading on it, well, the first part I said it was trying to understand like the percentages, right? And one of the things we were talking about last time is like, well, if you want to ask them to come back for a lower number, you really need to tell them a number to come back to, instead of just saying go back to the right. And well, how do I get to a number that we could ask them to come to? And one of it we looked at was, well, we knew our enrollment had increased. Does that really tell us anything about what maybe our base number would be because we have a bigger ownership? And you actually see is we ended up with a bigger ownership through our minimum local contribution, which is assessed, or I know a large percentage of that is based on the calculations of town wealth, versus the actual, you see, the actual assessment only actually decreased by 0.1%. So it's hard to even come up with a number directly there of saying, well, what's a base number of, since we have more students physically attending Tohoto, is there a number we use as a base of saying, well, we would have kind of like there's this number plus a certain percentage increase. And to be honest with you, I can't find that base number. I really couldn't put a base number to that. So now I kind of look at, well, what would be the percentage increase we'd be wanting to ask for? We know that the numbers came in at, was it, our assessment was 6.6%. Our assessment is this $172,826, which totals a 6.6% increase in assessment. If we wanted to come out and say, well, if we only want our assessment increase 3%, if you looked at the previous year's assessment, which was this for Berlin, that means our assessment would be 78K, which means you'd be asking them to make a cut just from Berlin's assessment of 94,000. If you wanted just the assessment to increase only 3%. And of course, we also see for those percentages, 94,000, you're going to ask for nearly what, 100, they would need to make another $190,000 cut from the Boylston side. So you'd be looking at, they'd be nearly $300,000 cut total they would have to make for Tohoto if we wanted this type of cut. If you looked at those transportation costs, no, this was a big increase here. This increase right here is like 22%, I think what the number was. Yeah, actually almost 23% just in Berlin's assessment of the transportation cost. So one area you could look at is like, what if we absorb the transportation cost plus 3%? So you could look at saying that here's the increase in transportation costs of 29,056. We do it plus the 3% over the assessment, which was the previous assessment. So a total of 78,713. You would then add those two up, subtract them from our, their proposed assessment to us. And basically they would have to make a cut on our assessment of $64,756, which would result in our total assessment increasing 4.12%. Another area you could look at is saying, remember that 47,000 assumed reduction in state aid. Of course, that's their total state aid. Using those percentages I showed on the previous slides, you saw our percentages were showing us being at 33.75%. So if you assume we had 33.75% ownership of that 47K, you're looking at just under 16,000. So if you wanted to say we'd absorb 16,000 of the state aid, or the state aid, our share of 16,000 plus transportation, for example, plus 3%, you'd be then asking them to make a cut of nearly $50,000, which would then have our assessment at 4.72%. So, and of course, you could run these same numbers, assuming what if you wanted your, what if you went with this overall town assessment at 2.5%. And if you did that, you'd be adding, another 13,119 to any of these numbers to cut. So what I basically look at here is if you come back to give them a number to cut, you kind of have to tell them, why did you come up with a number? And these were ideas I had of potential, if we want to have them come back for a number that's showing less growth. These are proposals of ways you could show them of why we would come up a particular number, as opposed to just pull a number out of the sky. Or you could just come up and say, make an easy number and just say, make the assessment only 3%, that's 78,713, you cut 94,000, and we know that's nearly a $300,000 cut to their overall budget, because Boylston will have 2/3, will have about twice that being cut from their assessment. So that's where I basically was going with the numbers. The first part kind of shows where the percentage, where our percentage of ownership is of the operating budget. And this only looks at operating, doesn't talk about anything with capital. And ideas of where you could propose what would be acceptable increases, looking at what they have been, some things they're mandated by the state, and other things that obviously that they have their own increases that are they really lucky enough to take other cuts to absorb, whether it's like the union contract of the teacher salaries or other type of increases that they have in there that he could find something to offset. But this was just my, like say, idea of possible things to, give them a number. So open up to any discussion or anything you want to try to absorb from that. Or I guess anybody else had any other, what their ideas were. Because I get, one of the things we were thinking about doing was like, if we get, ask them to make a cut, what's a number they should cut towards and why?
Yeah, so I spoke to Bob Conrad this afternoon regarding his email back to Margaret and us, basically justifying their budget. And I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find. I met, there were 4.
I have it up on the screen. I have that.
Yeah, I mean, there's 4 key drivers, right? I mean, there's an increase in special education. They had it broken down with the 4.
Let's see. Again, this is historical.
And I'm not sure if it was in this email. It was certainly in their first presentation.
Yeah, and their other presentation, I think what you're thinking about was this.
Right.
This is Tahanto.
Right. So your supposition in your analysis was it sounded to me sort of like, so if we accept the transportation as a given and we accept the decrease in state aid as a given, and then look for 3% after that. And I guess I would ask you why you consider transportation a given and not special education costs when those were out of whack from what a normal year would be.
Right. I mean, those are, I guess the one piece about special education, I guess you could even, if you wanted to look at that as special education. I don't know. One thing I look at that one is I don't know how the percent. I mean, you could just take the same percentage of 33.75, assuming that's Berlin's ownership. But we also we'll never know. Is it Berlin that's responsible for that big increase? Is it Boylston?
Oh, right.
I don't know how you want.
Matter.
Right. You'll never know. But if you just assume the percentage, yes. I mean, you could make an assumption and say, okay, we have 33.75% of that number, and say that's a set number plus 3%. Right. I mean, those are other options.
Because I'm almost wondering if so once you got your last calculation there of after transportation and after Chapter 70 reduction and 3%, so we require a cut of 48,000. 48,000 is awfully close to 1/3 of the special education increase.
Yeah, if you took what's the numbers on that? What was it? 132K?
Yeah.
Oops. $375. Yep, you're within $2,500.
So one could argue, and I'm not usually arguing for the schools, but one could argue that there are 3 things that are almost completely out of their control, and those 3 things add up to the overage that we're concerned about.
Correct. With the assumption, but right, and the other 3%, right, it would be if you went with those base numbers of, correct, the 44.5, the nearly 30,000 here, and then the state aid of 16, then added 3% on top of that, you're correct. That would be
Because we
nearly a
gave them a,
wash.
yeah, I mean, we gave them a guideline and we told them 2.5. And things that they have under their control, they pretty much stuck to that. And so in their defense, for them to reduce this by any of these numbers that we're talking about in any of the scenarios that you calculated, they're basically they're going to have to cut into they're actually going to have to reduce, I would imagine, probably reduce from last year's levels. Well, I guess maybe about the same, but it would basically all come out of their 2.5% that we gave them as a guideline. So I don't know.
Correct. Yeah, if you use the 2.5, again, you'd be a little closer. You'd be with the 2.5. Actually, you'd add 13,000 to it, so you're looking at like 15,500. They're within.
Right. And then what was their capital reduction from the financing?
They
Basically,
went
right? I mean,
with-
the bond refinancing.
Yes, that was, what was the assumption on that one?
I want to say it was about 15,000. I think it was 40.
The reduction in the capital assessment was $55,202.
That's the
Yeah.
bond refinance, right, Margaret? Is that
But-
what you're saying?
That,
Yeah, but is that all of the capital? Or was there something else that they cut out of capital? Or was it
oh,
just-
that's only Tohoto. They reduced Berlin Memorial capital assessment by 27,000.
Right. No, I know. I'm just for now. I'm just trying to focus on Tohono. So, but did they like take any projects out or something that is reducing their capital assessment, or is this strictly due to the bond refi?
That's the borrowing only.
Because Bob, I got the impression from Bob today that he was saying that it would be a savings of 45,000, but maybe that was just our portion.
Yeah, because I'll just do a quick number on this 126. If you did 1/3, it comes out to 41,700.
Okay.
And he's making estimate that he's hoping is a minimum reduction.
Okay, so that's the total debt service reduction through the refinance. So that's the entire that's the entire capital budget split between Boylston and Berlin,
Yes.
right?
Wait, the 126 is?
It's got to be because
Right.
our reduction's only a portion of that.
Right. Okay. So so you said it was 40,000, Scott, 40 something, 40.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, 41,
1/3
720.
of that is 41,720. Yep.
So if we take the 41,000 off of their proposed increase of the 6-point-something%, given the special education and transportation, then we're down to, what's our percentage at that point? Is that the 4 something? The 4? No, it's going to be higher than that. It's going to be 5 something, right?
Which
Well, I'm just looking at the
percentage?
total cost to Berlin for Tohoto would be the operating plus the capital. So what's our total increase in
Let's see.
expenditure?
I didn't put in the capital. What was? You see the capital?
Because I do
items?
look at the bond refinance as a operating savings. I mean, because this is a savings going forward.
Yeah,
year
it's-
over
I
year.
mean, in the end, it's still coming out of the same bucket for the town. Let's see. Yes, let's see where they recall what slide the capital.
No, so I mean, it would just be assessments. It wouldn't be revenue. It would be town assessments for Tohono.
Yeah, here was the Tohoto cap. I mean, this is the total capital rate. This was Boylston share.
Right.
This was our share, showing a total of 15,201. So they must have been reducing their capital plan.
It's Boylston. Or no, that's Berlin Elementary.
Next, Boylston
Still
Elementary.
Boylston, Berlin Memorial. Sorry.
All right, Tohoto. Yeah, I don't see the
There's
details
not
here.
there's not a one slide for the cost to the town with both of them on there. We'd have to add them together.
There was.
What's that year-over-year changes one?
It's
That's
near
pretty
the
bad.
end of the presentation. It's called
Right
Town
here.
Assessments Berlin. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so Tohono.
Yeah, they reduced. Well, this is Berlin Memorial's capital. They reduced by 27K. The Tohoto capital, it looks like it's combining in the.
Well, I mean, do we agree with that bottom line number, that total number of 2.6 overall? I mean, is that between the two? Or was that funny math? Because there was something about the retirement money
Well,
and how they
all they did was this one. This was where they added this, where the retirement was coming in. That was added to the FY21 budget. So this was the original town meeting approved budget, as I understand it. Then they absorbed this from the Worcester County retirement of 55,784.
So they're calling the restated assessment of
Yes.
3 million.
So the restated right here.
And now this year it's 3 million 4, so 2.5.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it's a fixed cost that came off one side of the books for the
Right.
town that got transferred to the schools. So it's really not funny math at all in that particular piece.
Okay. And the Berlin Memorial capital number is down to 27,000 that's from pulling a capital project, isn't it? Or capital project?
Yes. And
I mean,
then
it
the
makes for a big
Tohoto,
percentage just because of the dollar amount. The dollar amount above 27 is not huge on the overall scheme of the increase we're talking about, but it makes for a big percentage. I guess I'm trying to get to a big picture piece of one-time savings on operations or on capital versus long-term savings in capital. And then is it appropriate to call that an offset to the operations? And I feel like it is. If they're going to be saving year over year, the bond savings, I feel like that's a legitimate. I mean, it's the same. If you can reduce a teacher or you can reduce your financing costs. Either way, you've reduced your cost by dollar amounts.
And you're right, that is it's a new lower baseline.
Right.
So But Stan, isn't that,
But the
isn't
Berlin
that,
number,
isn't debt service always operating budget? Or am I confused?
well, I guess what I would be saying, no, it is, but there would be times when you could refinance something and take a one, like almost like a cash out refinance and take that cash and apply it to, or do something to pay for something that you're now not going to have to do. And so that comes off your budget this year, but it's not really reducing your ongoing long-term expenses, I guess is what I guess I'm trying to make a distinction between gimmicky financing and actual I don't know how I want to word it, but I feel like I feel like this is legitimate operating reduction.
So did you get
But Berlin's not though, because I mean so I guess in answer to your question, Mary, so if you look at Berlin Memorial's capital reduction of 27,000, and we're going to try to use that and say that that's an offset to Berlin Memorial's operating assessment, it's only an offset because they just put off a capital project.
Yeah,
The distinction between the two.
right, but time is, the time element in all of our consideration of this is important because we do a budget once a year.
Yep.
And so, you know, if there was a decision to put something off, fine, that impacts this year's costs, whether they're operating or capital. And you know, when you were asking about funny numbers or funny accounting, when I look at this slide that's up and I look at the total, I'm not sure mathematically that you want to add a bunch of percentages, or I don't know how they calculated the 2.6, whether they added the column of numbers or whether they actually did it from the individual categories of costs. But I think the real percent that's on this page we're looking at is the 6.6% that Berlin's got for Tohoto. That's really, I think, what's at issue here. And the 2.6, I do think that's a funny number. I don't give it much credit because it's a percent. You know, the dollar figures in under the total, fine, those make sense. But the percent, adding a column of percents or.
But yeah, but isn't it 173 divided by 6.8 million? Isn't that what 2.6?
I suppose that's what it is. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, they're saving going forward every year $55,000 in financing costs, which would be the same thing as right now cutting a teacher. Like, okay, eliminate a teacher right now.
Yep.
And don't rehire that position for the next 10 years.
Yep.
There's no difference between refinancing and saving that 55,000 a year and cutting a teacher. So
well, except that it doesn't affect delivery of services, so it's actually a preferable way to take that amount of money out of an operating budget.
Correct.
So, but we don't know. Do they know yet whether this is going to happen? Because it was.
I think it's just a matter of how much, not whether it will.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, it could be.
Yeah.
I think the 55 might be a little high just for the refinancing, because if you look at what that number was in our percentage, you know, we were, even my calculation is assuming 1/3, it showed it only being just over 41,000. I think this is including the capital items, just like you have that were coming in like BMS. This is including the savings from the debt refinancing and other capital things that they're not doing. Because it looks like to get this number.
So it's 40, if you want to say 14,000 or 15,000 plus 27, you're at $42,000 that they would be over, plus the 0.1% of 2.6, that they would be over the 2.5 that we sort of mandated. And some of that is due to them putting off improvement, you know, repairs or improvements or maintaining the building, however you want to put it. But capital assessment is, you know, maintenance. It's dollars that need to be spent on the schools. Now, do they have to be spent in a COVID year? Not necessarily, but so I guess this is where it sort of gets into the fuzzy math thing, because if you allow them to take this credit of refinancing and not adjust any levels of service, then what happens when the financing's over? Is that their levels of service just keep increasing, and now there won't be an offset down the road from financing. Because in 10 years or whatever, 15 years, whenever that bond is paid off, and all things being equal, if the assessment keeps going up 6%, then at the end of that time frame, now you don't have that savings of the negative 9.6%. That number goes away, and now all you have is the increase of 6.6%, and that's not sustainable. But it's also out of their control. It's special education money, and it's transportation money, and it's reduced state aid money. That's half of it. That's half of that increase. And that special education increase was wildly higher than, we actually had a decrease last year. And this year it's flipped. It's not just higher, it's like a double whammy because it's increased over the baseline.
On the revenue side of what's in front of us here from, Margaret, do you know where the state aid and education is with the legislature? Because the governor had recommended increase. I don't, early first part of the year, the Governor Baker did not recommend transportation increase, but did recommend, giving a good funding on the, what is it, Chapter 70. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, that's one of my notes, Mary, because he did recommend, he has recommended increasing Chapter 70 funding, but he is trying to target the more disadvantaged school districts. So we may not benefit as much as other school districts. So I have a note. I would like to check the regional school districts cherry sheets. Bob also mentioned when he was presenting to FinCom that the debt refinancing number for Tohoto wasn't final. I thought he said that it was, and I know that we've talked about other capital projects may be being bundled under there, but he mentioned that might not be a final number, and the number might actually be better. So we may see a little bit of additional savings in the debt service for Tohoto. And then the final thing that I want to check, I think we really need to, I'm going to try to have a conversation with June and Dennis and Bob about the Worcester County retirement. I want to try to get a good handle on that shift in costs, the $55,000, to make sure that that's an accurate number. So I'm sorry, Mary, that was a long answer to a short question. And
no, and I think you told me before the first part of it that the aid, the increase in Chapter 70 that the governor wasn't supporting was supposed to focus on the disadvantaged schools. I think I already heard that and forgot.
Right, and also isn't that his recommendation? I mean, that's not necessarily what passes, right?
That's right, exactly. And I don't think this is a year where the legislature is going to be unsympathetic to school districts. So it very well could turn out that, the school does benefit somewhat from this, especially where this additional money is coming from the federal government now. So maybe there's some way they can apply those monies to this year's budget without having them become recurring expenses.
So for what it's worth, the item talked about the governor's proposal, and I clicked it because I said, oh, this is interesting. And under the governor's proposal, Berlin would increase about $7,000. This is the Chapter 70 school aid. And Boylston would increase about $13,000. Now, I think in Bob's budget here, he shows $47,000 down, but I'm looking at a newspaper report of the governor's proposal at the end of January. So that's why I was saying. And then the other piece of it is that the governor's recommendation was to cut regional transportation costs. So Berlin-Boylston was supposed to go down about $3,000.
Is that the elementary schools or Tohoto?
Yeah, right. That was my question too. Does that affect, would that affect regional versus?
It says proposed regional transportation cuts.
Yeah, no, I'm just talking the assessment, even that the the increase, would that be when you say to Berlin and to Boylston? Would that just be for their elementary schools, or does that also roll into Chapter 70 for a regional school district, which I assume it would, right? Because
Stan, it says general aid. It's Chapter 70 general aid.
so that should,
Right.
should
So,
translate for both.
yeah, and I guess
maybe they're being conservative on their numbers, just to
well,
be.
that's what I'm suggesting, is they're being conservative on what the revenue picture will be. And of course, all of that is crystal ball gazing, isn't it?
Right. Well, we could go back and ask them to be wildly optimistic, and then they don't have to cut anything.
Okay, Stan, right. Okay, that's a good way to look at it, isn't it? Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Is there a magic money tree somewhere?
Yeah, give it a couple of shakes.
I guess
mean, If
one
the
que-
Republican Governor Baker is willing to do this, don't you think the Democratic legislature is willing to do it? I don't know.
You do think so? You would think so.
Stan and all, I am sorry, but I'm gonna have to go to this select boards meeting, but you can certainly keep meeting. I'm just going to, mute and head over to there.
I've
Okay?
got to add one question
Okay.
to you. You have to answer it right now, but
Sure.
I know those legislators always late, but what's the chances that we're going to have our town meeting in May as normal?
Oh, the board's going to be talking about that tonight. I get the sense there could be movement to hold off a couple of weeks, but it'll be nothing. I don't think it'll be anything like last year. I don't think we'll be going till the end of June. I think we may go off a couple of weeks and into
But
mid-May.
Don't you think it would still be outside though?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
So only a couple of weeks is a rounding error for the legislature's speed of moving. So I
Yeah.
was hoping it might be something that we might have more guidance from the legislature, but we
Well,
won't.
it's a great question, Scott. We may have, and I apologize for the noise, from the other meeting. We may actually have, who knows, we may have a House budget. We may have some House numbers by then, by May. So, but yeah, this past year they were historically late. So
Yeah.
anyway, all right.
Okay.
All
So
right.
I'm
Thank
gonna,
you, Margaret.
all right,
Thanks,
thank you.
Margaret.
I'm gonna mute. Just let me know what information you'd like me to convey, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, is there anything you want me to put? I know I'm sharing, or do you want me to stop sharing, or anything you want to look at here? I'm trying to keep up with everybody's.
Well, I'd like to. I really would like to just go back to that overall revenue one with the bottom line number of 2.6% increase. And see what we. Yeah, not that one. So again, I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on saving capital wise versus operation wise? Like, is that a legitimate way to try to come up with a number for the year, or is it funny math?
Well, Stan, don't you really want to look at operating and capital separately? I mean, why do we combine them?
Because we're looking at what we've asked the schools to only increase their budget to us by 2.5%, and that includes both things.
Okay, and I'll come back again and look at the Tohoto assessment to Berlin, because every other category, the school district did what we asked them to do. They're under two, they're 2.5 at max. So it's really that Tohoto number. And I think if we're explaining it to people at town meeting, or if we're making some kind of response to the select board or to the school district, it's around that part of the budget.
And this is probably a discussion going on with Boylston too. I mean, their assessment is 5.3. I mean, it's not as big as 6.6, but it's still a big number, because as I mentioned before, the numbers I had run was because, well, actually the $47,000 cut in the aid, the actual number is, because it's all coming out of assessment, the total assessment combined between the two towns is 5.75.
Yeah,
And that is a big number. And of course, we've got 6.6 is ours, and I just said 5.3 on Boylston's side.
so Scott, what's the, sorry, what are the dollar numbers on that, for us on that 6.6? I need to write that down.
Okay, 6.6.
172,
It's 172,000.
173,000.
172,826.
Yeah, we'll call it 173,000.
And that's where I took from, you can see how because you also see it here when you looked at the total assessments. This includes both Berlin and Boylston's numbers. You see the 172,000. Of course, it's the whole number for Boylston is 281,000. And you can see this 172,000 number is, a big chunk is that transportation assessment. It's like a 23% increase. So that number, you're getting nearly 30,000 right there. And then in the general, the minimum contribution results in our minimum contribution going up by 31,000.
Right, so is that transportation assessment higher because of COVID? Is it because they're having to run more buses, or is that because of the new contract? Is that because the state is reduced?
I think it was because of special education. If we go to, they have another slide.
Yeah, okay.
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 I think I have this almost memorized now. I'm trying to get to each section. Let's see, where was it in there? This is BMS. BMS in Tohoto.
That one.
80K sped transportation.
Right.
So an $88,000 increase, but 80,000 of that special education. So.
All right. So add those two numbers together. That's $212,000. And we're saying that their number, well, I guess that's the number to us is the 170, right? Is the
Well, 172
increase,
is our total assessment increase. The transportation.
Yeah, total assessment increase, right?
Yeah.
So if you took 1/3 of 132 plus 80, so if you took 212 times 1/3, right, you'd be at 70,000.
Yep.
Take 70,000 off of that 170, and what's our percentage increase at Tohoto?
It was 172. So
102.
It was
But I don't know what the assessment was. So
102 divided by 2,623,776.
So they'd still be at almost a 4% increase.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd be at 3.9.
Yeah, so that doesn't explain 6% for sure.
I think one of the big factors, I got back to that 47,000 drop in revenue they projected. And if you take 20,000 of that drop and then look at the Berlin numbers, it takes it down to 2.6% increase in fiscal 22 over fiscal 21.
Well, 20,000 I don't think would do it, Mary. That's not enough. I mean, we just took 70,000 off and it only dropped it from 6 to 3
Did I
to
do
4.
something wrong in my math?
Right.
I don't
And
know.
I think our share would be like around 16,000.
Okay,
So
so
if we had, so what you want to say, 102 plus 16? No, what were we saying? 102 subtract 16, right?
well,
If no, you'd right, subtract it because it'd be a revenue that should have been there, or by all accounts, right, compared to last year, should be there.
Oops.
Yeah, so now you're at 86
by
divided by,
2,623. Now you're at 3.3.
Okay, so you're still not where,
right, and I just had a fleeting thought, and now it seems to be gone. Oh, well, just, all right, so I guess, again, back to my, I guess I keep going back to our instructions for them. And while I understand exactly what you're saying, that 6.6 number, and however we want to slice it and dice it and come up with a different number based on increases or surprises or that sort of thing, is an unpalatable number. But we also asked them to come in 2.5% higher to the town. I mean, those were their marching orders. And
Yep.
part of how they accomplished pretty darn close to that, because they're at 2.6, is some of it is through putting off of capital expenditures, but a big chunk of it is refinancing the debt, which was
Yep.
a smart cost savings move on their part to reduce operating expenses. So I think to pull it out is disingenuous. I think I don't think we should, I don't feel like we should just pull it out and say that it doesn't count. Not all of it. I feel like putting off of the 42,000-ish, because I think we said the 27 in Berlin is all putting off of project. And some of that 55, I think we said about 15,000 was putting off because the financing savings was 40, or 41. So 40 something thousand of that was just putting off capital expenditures, but they've saved $40,000. And you could take that out. If you take that off the 172, it brings it to a better number for sure.
Yeah, what would that be?
But it doesn't bring it to two. It doesn't bring it to the 2.5. I mean, you're only getting to the 2.5 because they've taken off. They've put off 42,000 in other expenditures.
Yeah, it would get down to 5.1%.
Yeah. So actually, I'm starting to agree with you, Mary, on this 2.6 number. And is that a real number? Because we're not even getting close to that when we take these other adjustments. Why do we never even get close to that 2.6?
Well, this is the total between the time. You're at 2.5% here. So, I mean, this is like, see what the math said. So they basically
Well, we
saying
said it
it's
was the 173 divided by 6.6.
173, 712 divided by, is it 6655480?
Oh, 6829. What do you?
Yeah, 2.6. So this number here divided by last year's assessment.
By last year, right? Okay.
So yeah, that
So-
comes to 2.6.
guys, are you using the restated fiscal 21 or
Yeah.
using the
Restated.
restated? So
Yes.
the restated fiscal 21, what is 2.5% of that? What's the dollar figure?
No, that it is a
Probably
restated. That's what we're
170.
using.
Sorry?
Yes.
We are using the restated. I'm using
Yeah, if
the
you take
restated.
that, Scott, take that 6,655,480 times 2.5,
Oh, okay.
just to see what that 1/10 difference is.
Yeah, I'm looking
Right.
for the dollar equivalent, Stan. That'll help us understand where,
Right. So the increase should have been 166, and instead it's 173. So it's an additional 6,300, an extra 6,300 is all they're over. And Bob actually has that. Well, yeah, he's pretty close. That's that 7325 number down there. I was rounding off.
Yeah, he has the 2% right here, exactly that number.
Yeah, so he's stating there that if they had matched the number that we gave them, they should have been at an increase of 166, and they're at 173, which is only really a different delta of 73.25.
Now, did the number that was given was exactly 2.5, or was it a number of a range
what
of
Mark-
2.5 to
Margaret-
3?
No, she just told them to keep it to 2. I'm pretty sure her direction to them was to try to keep it to 2.5.
Okay.
I don't think she went up as high as 3. I think she told them to try to keep it to 2.5. Because I think the whole intention was to not go higher than our, kind of our increase in property tax potential there of the 2.5. So I'm pretty confident that was the marching orders. So, when you're all said and done, they're not that far off. Much as we don't like it, they're really not that far off.
That's been my gut sense of this, Stan, as I look at it. And I think from the town of Berlin's perspective, the most we can hope for is the state aid comes in over their conservative estimates.
I mean, we could ask them to go back and try to take 20 grand off the budget, and that means 40 grand off of Boylston side. And I don't know what they're going to do to save 60 grand, and that's not our concern. But I mean,
well, you saw there, which was what I had pointed out last time, going back 10 years ago, dealing with the schools back when, well, BMS was still separate, but we would just usually target a number towards them, whether it came off of Tohoto or Berlin
Right.
Memorial. And of course, you saw his thing came back exactly that, saying if you need us to cut, we'd like you to ask us to cut a number off of, or allow us the flexibility to cut a number off of Berlin Memorial for the total for the town, as opposed to forcing a specific number off of Tohoto.
right, which is, again, it's sort of this. It's accomplishes the same thing as far as we're concerned, but
Right. And from their perspective, right, if you ask them to cut 20,000, they can just cut 20,000 from BMS, as opposed to when they go to Tohoto, they'd have to cut 60,000.
right. Part of me wants to get back to them and tell them to sharpen it a little bit, just for the sake of telling them to sharpen it a little bit. Like this is their presentation. I know this is what's been passed though at their budget hearing, right? They can't. I think they would have to. Don't they have to go back and like have another hearing, and do they have to, for them to just cut? Then it has to go back to the school board, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we want to even reach out and ask Boylston's FinCom what they're thinking about on their?
Does it matter to us really? In the long run, does it really matter to us?
Well, it does in the sense that, if they're already adamant of saying they're going to ask them for a cut of a certain dollar amount, it puts us into the same, especially if it's specifically on Tohoto, right? Again, if they give them the flexibility of anything between Boylston Elementary and Tohoto, then it may not affect us at all.
Yeah. Right. But I think all we gain out of that is just having them be the bad guy, as opposed to, I don't know that we're. I don't know. I feel like.
Stan, one of the questions that I think going back to them I'd ask is that difference between 2.5 and 2.6, that how much was that? Was it $7,000?
$7,000, yeah.
Yeah. So go back and say to them, are you willing to go on your revenue projections out of the state? Want to go higher on those projections and give us what we asked for? And I don't know if
in other words, not to, so in other words, if they do achieve, So yes, I guess what happens if if this is their proposed budget and this is what they've gotten past the school board, what does happen if their numbers come in better?
Well, specifically, if they came in about 20,000 better, because that gets us to the 2.5.
Well, right, I guess but that's what I'm asking. What happens to that money? Do they have? Is there some revolving fund that they have? Is that do they if this is their budget, do they return it because they don't need it? Do they? I mean, so what's the mechanism for an approved school budget that is reliant on state aid that comes in after the school budget's approved? They could never match up. They're never going to match up.
So Stan, I'll flip the question back to you, because I wasn't involved with the Berlin budget when we were getting the Chapter 70. I came in at the tail end of it. So what did we do if it came in higher than we projected in our revenue?
Right. That's what I'm saying. I don't know.
Do
I
you
don't know the
remember?
answer to that.
But we did it. The town did it. Berlin did it in the past because he used to come to us.
Yeah. So maybe that's a June question. I don't know the answer to that.
You don't remember from FinCom what happened? What happened?
No, because that was always the magic behind the curtain stuff with Scott,
Yeah.
with
Okay.
Scott Hawkins and Buzz doing the magic computer spreadsheet. I mean,
Well, I mean, big part came down to you just kind of holding them. The best thing to do is hold them accountable to where they spend the extra money, because you will know what the proposed Chapter 70 tuition revenues were. It's not even as simple as just the Chapter 70 tuition. They would get other type of grants that may come in
Sure.
after the fact, or other type of, I don't know if they still refer to it, you said pothole money, and just different terms that they had from the legislature about how much they actually would receive the previous year versus what you projected. And then what did they do with that extra money?
Yeah.
In the ideal world, that you would know, without big unforeseen big expense, you'd expect that would be put into their excess and deficiency. That if they got 200,000 more than expected, that if they stick within their budget, that they'd end up with an extra 200,000 in excess and deficiency that can be used to the budget in following years.
well, right. So I mean, do they put it in their circuit breaker money for special education? Do they put it in the revolving fund for their school lunch program? I mean, I don't know where money like that would go, but
Right. Well, Chapter
but
70
asking
is
them for more revenue, it feels like wrong. It feels like we ought to ask them for cuts, for expense cuts. But
do you know what our numbers were last year? What was the projected fiscal year 21 and what they actually got? Do we know?
no,
that?
I don't. We wouldn't. I don't think we would know that. I'm not. Or if they have to disclose it, I don't know where they disclose it.
Well,
Is
this
in-
was they should be the what they put in there should have been should have been the fiscal year 21 actuals, and then you could go back to what was proposed in the budget. I mean, this should have been actuals that they had, and then what was actually used during budget time last year.
I bet they're using the budget numbers and not actuals, because there's too much. Well, I don't know that. I'm just guessing based on all of the different parameter of all the different money that's coming into them from Chapter 70 to transportation to special education, money going out. Like, it feels to me like they're just going to use
Dan?
budget numbers, not actuals. Hi, June.
Dan? Oh, there, I've been trying to get through and I can't get my volume to work. As far as extra money, if they wind up getting more state revenue than what they budgeted, then that will turn into, like, I think it was Scott said, it'll turn into an E&D. They'll just have extra money at the end of the year.
But extra money to what, June? Where does it go? I mean,
They have a free cash number. So every year
So-
they actually also have to have they do a balance sheet just like we do. And if they have extra money, it becomes free cash.
Is that
Which-
shown in this
but
slide?
I don't see any
I
reference.
think there
in
was,
any of their-
there was someplace I remember seeing
there?
it, but I can't remember where.
They only
Okay, well-
they mentioned it where because they're using 60,000 from E&D as that's their proposals as from the year before.
And just an FYI, I just wanted to mentioned something as far as if they cut their capital, usually capital is a one-time thing versus
Right.
if they don't, and they increase their budget but cut the capital, that is an ongoing expense.
Right, exactly.
So I
Yeah.
just wanted to,
Yep. Well, I'm sorry, guys. I knew this was going to happen, but I'm actually, I got to go.
yeah, you had that at the meeting. I think it was towards the end.
So,
Well, I think the main part is we got some numbers to, think about here. As opposed to, where we were last Wednesday.
okay, so that we can make some recommendations on Wednesday, but I thought we kind of needed to have our numbers by Wednesday. That's kind of the point of this meeting, I thought.
Yeah, I guess the ideal world would have been like, we give a dollar amount to send back to,
Right.
Was it Bob?
Well, it just kills me that their numbers are always like the last ones to us, and yet they're the giant portion of the budget. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah, I think it is annoying because it is. It's
Such a driver to the.
It's
the
such a
budget.
driver is exactly right. Yeah. This may
What-
not be the year to take out the annoyance on that, aside from, talking to them about it, but the reality of it, I don't know that,
Well, it never changes, so I don't know. I'm not sure how much it can change.
okay, all right. Yeah, you've got more experience with this than I do, that's for sure.
Oh man, it's just always been. It's always been this way. All right, guys, I'm sorry. Thank you for your time,
Thank you,
and
Stan.
we will reconvene on Wednesday, I guess.
Yeah,
so
okay,
who's
Stan.
calling the meeting? Liz?
Yeah.
Stan's
Yes, ma'am.
closing?
So we as a committee have no decision on this budget yet, so
Not tonight, no.
not tonight. Okay, it was helpful. I appreciate the work you did.
Yeah, it absolutely was helpful. I mean, we needed to start kind of knocking around scenarios, and I think I think this was good. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
Thanks.
see everybody.
Scott, thanks for all your work on all those numbers.
Thanks.
The motion? Oh,
Yeah.
well.
Well, meeting is adjourned officially.